Summer routines live or die by how easy they are, and honestly, if something takes too much effort, I'm out. That's why Groons is my go-to. It's my one daily pack of gummies covering my greens, vitamins, and minerals. Plus, it has 6 grams of prebiotic fiber, which is more than 2 cups of broccoli. No mixing powders, no giant pills, no hassle. I just rip open the pack and I'm done. They taste good and they make it easy to stay on top of my health, even when life gets busy. Save up to 52% with the code PODCAST at Groons.co. That's code PODCAST at GRUNS.co.
It's the Go Gopher Podcast with Mike Grimm, episode number 225. I am Mike Grimm, voice of the Golden Gophers, and welcome back to the podcast. We're coming to you from a unique location this week on the Go Gopher Podcast. I'm in the state of Iowa visiting some family, and we're talking college football with one of the very best college football writers in America. Scott Dochterman is based here in Iowa. He covers the Iowa Hawkeyes on a weekly and daily basis, but also covers, watches, and analyzes the entire college football landscape as well as anyone around. And so since I was here and he was here, we figured let's talk college football on the Go Gopher Podcast. The ever-changing landscape of college football is our topic today. We've timed Scott's return visit to our podcast perfectly. Stick around for a tremendous college football conversation. Our Go Gopher Podcast is presented by alumni-owned Sunbelt Business Advisors and True North Mergers and Acquisitions. If you're a business founder planning to exit your business, start by contacting Sunbelt Business Advisors and True North Mergers and Acquisitions. Sunbelt serves more businesses up to $5 million in revenue than anyone, and True North M&A serves companies with revenues up to $150 million. Get a confidential, no-cost, no-obligation business valuation started today. Hey, make the most of your life's work. Visit sunbeltminnesota.com or tnma.com today. Longtime Gopher sports supporter Cub is a proud sponsor of the Go Gopher Podcast. In a hurry, don't worry, Cub delivers. Get fresh meat, produce, everyday essentials, and more delivered to your door. Cub is the official grocer of the Golden Gophers and proud to support Gopher athletics for over 20 years. Shop happy. The Go Gopher Podcast is also presented by onX Maps. Find out how to download the onX Fish app for free by listening to the Go Gopher Podcast. We want to once again welcome brand new sponsor Great Clips to the Go Gopher Podcast. We appreciate their support of the show, and we want to thank all of you listeners for making the show attractive for great people from Great Clips to come on board. Great Clips, get in, get out, look great. We'll talk more about Great Clips later in the podcast. We're podcasting episode 225 from the Aquarius Home Services studio. We also invite you to subscribe or follow the Go Gopher Podcast. It's free to do so. You can go back and listen to previous Go Gopher Podcast. Last week, for example, we had a terrific off-season chat with Golden Gopher head football coach PJ Fleck. Still so much timely chatter in that one. I'd advise you to go back and listen if you missed it. This week, we continue talking college football. We've got the very talented Scott Dochterman from The Athletic. He'll join me next.
I'm Clay Geary, walk-on turned scholarship wide receiver for Gopher football.
And I'm Ben Utek, U of M alumni, Super Bowl champion, and Tony Dungy Uncommon Award winner.
We understand championship culture, which is why we're part of the True North family of companies.
True North invests in only elite teams, like the champion team at Sunbelt Business Advisors, Minnesota's largest seller of companies. To learn more about True North and our diverse family of independently owned companies, visit TrueNorthEquityPartners.com.
This is Jim Suhan for TSR Injury Law, 612 TSR Time. TSR Injury Law started off as a small business. They are now a large, very successful business because they help people, because they win cases. If you are injured, call 612 TSR Time. They will help you out or point you in the right direction. They will not charge you unless they win your case, and they win a lot of cases. We don't want you to need their help. They don't want you to need their help. But if you do need their help, call 612 TSR Time.
It's episode 225, the Go Gopher Podcast. We're in a unique spot here, North Liberty, Iowa this week, and we are going to talk college football. We're at a place called Field Day, and our guest is one of the great college football writers in the country from The Athletic, a return visitor. I think this is your third appearance now in 225 episodes. That puts you you're about a 1% guest. Hey. Scott Dochterman, good to see you.
Great to see you too. I'm glad you were able to come down to enemy territory.
Yeah, well, the way I look at it, you're such a compelling guest. I was going to jump in the car and drive 6 hours to get an in-person interview with you.
Well, that's very kind of you, but I love coming up to the Twin Cities, so one of these days I'd do the same thing.
Well, I think your first appearance, you were in the Twin Cities. You came over to our studio and we did that podcast. I don't know, that had to be 5 years ago. Your son, I think, was a student up at the Minneapolis, was it Art Institute?
Yeah, both my son and daughter both graduated from the Minneapolis College of Art and Design there off Nicollet Avenue. So I knew the Avenue of the Saints. I could drive it in my sleep. After all the trips to cover the Gophers against the Hawkeyes back in the days when I was doing the Hawkeyes, and then of course seeing my kids as often as I did.
Yeah. So here we are. We're in your territory. I'm actually while I wouldn't turn down a chance to drive 6 hours to have you in person, I'm here. My niece, of course, people know I'm from here, so I spent some time with family. My niece got married on Friday, and I'm still hanging out and watched my high school play baseball last night. So it was kind of fun here. But as I was brainstorming early in the week, I'm like, what am I haven't even, with the wedding and travel, been gone since last Wednesday. What am I doing for my podcast this week? I'm like, you know what, with all that's going on in college football, and I know you're a stone's throw away, here we are. We're at a cool place called the Field Day, man. If you come down for an Iowa game from Minnesota, this might not be, because you're, what are we, about 5 miles from Coralville, Iowa City or so?
Yeah, we're all in the same metro area. Yeah. I use those with air quotes, but it's Coralville, North Liberty, and Iowa City are all kind of one community these days.
Yeah, no doubt. So you did cover the Hawkeyes for many, many years, day to day, week to week. You still cover them. You attend some games. You attend news conferences. You're big into the Big Ten. But tell us about your role with the Athletic right now and what it entails.
Yeah, I'm a national college football writer, and so I cover topics on a broad perspective, but my unique background with the Big Ten, in particular this part of the country, enables me to kind of focus more on the Big Ten. I would say that's more my beat, and it's also allowed me to expand my role, which has been great. I've been able to go to places like Illinois, Northwestern, Minnesota for specific games, rather than just when Iowa played there. And there's compelling stories at each of these campuses. A couple of the fun ones that I remember last November, I went to Wrigley when Northwestern played Michigan, and the day before I took a tour of their brand new stadium, which was really, it's still coming together.
Yeah.
But Pat Ryan gave billionaire that's buying it basically gave me the tour, and it was fantastic. And then coming up last year for the season finale, it was great to see the Axe game. It's something I've always wanted to see, but I always got kind of stuck. So I got to cover that game in a blizzard, and it was great. And being right there, and I thought one of the coolest moments was Anthony Smith kind of running up the tunnel with the axe in his hands.
Yeah.
And it was like, okay, it's you could really feel how much this mattered to them.
Yeah, for sure. And you've, with the changing landscape, there's a lot of off-the-field stuff, too, that you've dived into. And the two big stories, and certainly one big story that is, if there's a college football podcast out there nationally, there's a million of them, right? There isn't one that hasn't touched on. You mentioned you have Big Ten focus, but here in Iowa, it's Big 12 country as well, with Iowa State and Ames across the way. So the Big 12's in the meat grinder right now. Brendan Sorsby, Texas Tech, 2-game suspension. Retired judge says, he can play. Texas Tech stands behind their guy. Basically, in a landscape that nobody can agree on anything, everybody but Texas Tech seems aligned with this is crazy. We've reached, I think Charlie Becker said, we've reached a new low, right, in terms of where we're at. So generally, just give me your Cliff Notes thoughts on this, and then we can dive a little deeper. That's the first topic, and then we'll get into it. You did a nice story recently that I invite listeners to read on a potential 2014 playoff, which you have all kinds of great numbers, and you dove into it. But Sorsby's such a big story right now. If we're doing and talking college football, we got to bat lead off with that topic.
Luckily, it all got resolved late on Monday night when he decided to enter the supplemental draft.
Yeah.
I think that was the best possible solution to this, because Texas Tech has been very hard-headed and stubborn and tried to come out and justify this decision. Well, there's no justification for it. This is the cardinal sin, the third rail, whatever cliche you want to use, to college sports or any sports. I mean, Pete Rose is not in the Hall of Fame because he bet on baseball. And in this situation, we can't, out of one step, say, oh, well, we have these rules and everybody needs to obey the rules, and then turn around and flip it around and say, but not that it applies to us. And for a activist judge in Texas to take this up and turn out a verdict that ultimately, gave him eligibility and gave him a 2-game suspension, I mean, that's a mockery of the entire system. And how are you going to have an organization that would actually be able to supervise sports? I mean, that would be the end of the NCAA, in my opinion, if you can do it that way. So I think that this was and the Big 12, to its credit, on Monday came out very strongly.
Right.
Came out forcefully, and then state attorneys generals from Oklahoma, Kansas, Utah all came out and said they would support the Big 12 in this. And there's no gambling in Utah, and so this was, I think it was a forced play, but it was the right move for that league, and I think it's the right move for everybody. Now they can move on. Just Texas Tech's out of a lot of money, which it shouldn't be a matter to Cody Campbell, right?
Yeah, there's more where that came from in his case, and it sounds like the quarterback now that will step into those shoes was going to give the kid a run for the money, possibly anyway. Maybe not, but I agree. And and here, listening to some people who really cover it and dived in to some stuff, like there was preliminary discussion that people were talking like the Big 12, if they really are forced here, they may have to play a hand like, listen, Texas Tech, I mean, I don't think, obviously it didn't come to that, and it probably was never going to, but that they would have to carry a pretty heavy hammer and even threaten. You don't have to be a member of the Big 12 if you're going to, do this. I mean, that's how serious this situation, I think, a lot of people felt it was.
Absolutely. And I can understand. I mean, again, you have somebody who flouts the entire system, that thinks it's above the rules that everybody else has established over a century. And this is the one rule that you can't break. Not that there aren't others that you shouldn't either, but this is, when you're talking about this, you could still support him. You could still try to get what's best for him, and whether it's a gambling addiction. But when you bet on your own team, and I saw it here locally, it was a major deal in the state of Iowa with the Division of Criminal Investigation slapping up a warrantless geofence that tapped into all these phones at Iowa State and Iowa's athletic facilities, and it ended up, 41 different athletes became ineligible, and there were some that were just. And this is why it really was focused on the state of Iowa, because like Noah Shannon was a 2-year starting defensive tackle.
Yeah.
One of their captains, they were going to take him to Big Ten Media Days, and he made one bet. It was like $50 bet on the women's basketball team in the Final Four, and he lost his entire season. Man. And then you look at that versus now other players did bet on Iowa, and they got, Arlen Bruce, and this is one of the craziest ones. He bet, he took the under on Iowa, which everybody else in America
even
did.
when the under seemed too low. There was a couple years stretch there where you're still, if you're wagering on that, you're going to make some money.
I know, it's like every game it was like the low got lower. I mean, even like the invalid fair catch game and stuff in 23. But in his situation, he scores the touchdown that puts him on the over. Because he took a reverse, and there was like no way he could like accidentally fall down. It was just been too obvious.
Right.
So, and probably the worst one was this defensive tackle at Iowa State named Isaiah Lee, who took Texas and money line, even though he was a starting defensive tackle at Iowa State.
Wow.
And then Iowa State won 30-7. So
that's a double whammy there. Wow.
It's like,
and those guys obviously faced punishment. There was no, at that point, there was no lawyer involved. Well, I'm sure there were lawyers involved, but there was nothing where they were going to sue to try to get eligibility back. And if it was, it got that is one of the problems. Like, I know a lot of people, and the NCAA has certainly created a lot of its own issues. They talk about, hey, it's toothless, and it's toothless, but not, it's not self-inflicted necessarily, unless they just are hiring terrible lawyers. But they're losing every case because the antitrust and all this stuff. So it's really out of their control a little bit. Like, this wasn't, the NCAA didn't want this kid to play. They suspended him, and then they just lost the court case a retired judge who liked Texas Tech, and really the multi-year transfer rule came into play on a West Virginia judge who was a West Virginia fan. Did that kid go to Iowa State at one point or something? Whoever it was, the basketball player, and that started the whole allowable transfer just because this judge in West Virginia decided. So the NCAA. I mean, I don't know if it's collective bargaining at some point, but this all kind of goes back to it might have been the end of the NCAA if this goes to fruition and he ends up playing in games.
I do. I think that if he would have played for Texas Tech, then the NCAA would have been emasculated to the point that there's no return. You just really can't bring that organization back to what it is. And what it would have forced, in my opinion, would have been the conferences then take over, and then you would have seen self-reliant Big Ten, SEC, and other schools. But the Big 12, to its credit, the schools were so adamantly against it that they were very forceful in making sure that Brett Yormark, the commissioner, took a strong stand too. And, whether it's doing interviews that normally they would not do and swearing in these interviews, like Gene Taylor at Kansas State, who I think very highly of, they were able to really force this issue, and it needed to be done. And so hopefully this is a good first step, because there needs to be a governance structure. And and the difference between like here in Iowa and there in Texas was here the law enforcement community, including the governor, was very supportive of DCI and their activities, despite other people probably not being. But in Texas, they
want to win football games.
Yeah, right. It's really unfortunate. So I'm glad that this resolution happened. They can probably both sides kind of move on, and because Texas Tech, this would have been very uncomfortable. Some people thought, oh well, now they're going to position themselves in the SEC. There's no way they're getting in the SEC.
No,
or the Big Ten for that matter.
Yeah. And Cody Campbell, their billionaire, funder, and it's one thing just to be a donor and a booster and a guy who funds it, but he's also like the head of their board of regents or whatever the name of whatever, different schools have different names. I don't know what it is. And to me, the irony is that he's helping head up this college sports commission with a lot of former coaches and politicians, and President Trump was involved in all of this. And he's like, we're here to fix college football. Yeah. And then a month later, his school is basically trying to ruin college football. A lot of people think, what are we doing here, right?
There's a lot of inconsistency, let's say, with him, and it kind of cracks me up when you think, and I don't want to get into politics too much or anything, but you've got a billionaire who, an energy sector, very staunchly conservative, and yet he wants socialism for sports, and now he's going to trying to fix college sports except for and make it stronger, but then not if it includes
except if I need a quarterback.
Yeah, right. Yeah, it's like, come on, and let's face it, they're not going to win the national title. Even if Brendan Sorsby plays there, and he was very inconsistent last year. He's talented, and I think there'll be an NFL team that probably takes him a second or third round in the supplemental draft. They'll kind of all pass and then go, and but I don't know that I would stake my reputation in my college, because they would have. Big 12 would have stripped him for sure of any kind of potential championship this year. They wouldn't have allowed him to play for the championship. That may have prevented them, if they even were good, to get to the CFP. And then the hard feelings would have lasted to the point where maybe they kick him out.
Yeah, I think it would. If they would have dug in, if Texas Tech would have dug in, I think there's a path that could have ended up with Texas Tech not having a conference. And then what good would all of that have done, right? What do you think generally, Scott, in regard to the gambling issue? Because I've heard people talk about it, and I can't disagree with it, that now college football is kind of in bed with some of these, the revenue that's created on advertising for casinos. It seems like every third commercial, if you're watching a football game, is either a local casino, whether it be here in Iowa where we're recording this, or Minnesota where most people will be listening to this, or wherever else. And there's now it's in Minnesota. There's not legalized sports betting, but you go about 30 minutes south on I-35 across the way in Wisconsin, not too far. You can wager on sports if you're a Minnesota resident. You just have to leave the state. Here in Iowa, there is legalized sports betting. So what has to happen at the college level just to make sure that look, it's inevitable. There's going to be some of this, but how do you make sure there's not a big scandal, like some quarterback throws a game or a running back fumbles on purpose or what have you?
That's the scariest part because you don't know. I mean, we've had point shaving scandals in the past. Boston College when Tom Davis was the head coach, former Iowa coach. Bruce Pearl was an assistant there. When that went down, Northwestern 20, 25 years, 30 years ago.
Yeah, that was a game at Kinnick that kind of blew that open, right? Yeah. In terms of, I think there were some fumbles or whatever there. Iowa Northwestern, 96 was that?
Yeah,
somewhere in 95.
Basketball, and stuff. So I mean, there have been all these scandals. You can't quite prevent it, I think. But in some ways, I think the fact that you have NIL involved maybe is helpful. And it's the same way with the pros, that if you're getting paid, you're not going to get approached necessarily to throw this game. It's like, well, before, if they weren't getting paid and here's $20,000, go out and fumble or, fumble 4 times in the Rose Bowl and drop a touchdown pass when your team's got a chance to win a national title against UCLA. Maybe that happens.
You just don't know.
That's referencing a game. But then there's also, so can they prevent that? I think you're going to have to be very diligent and hope that you don't find anything. I imagine you will, but you just hope to police it as best as you can.
Yeah, and all coaches can do. PJ Fleck talked about this last week in a news conference, is just educate guys. And the other thing is the gambling part of it now has become, I think it's more like when you and I were growing up, well, let's face it, like 30, 40 years ago, Vegas was you'd have to go to Vegas if you really wanted to legalize gambling, right? Or, I'm talking blackjack and whatever else, play poker or craps or whatever. Well, now, in the Twin Cities, for example, these athletes are 25-minute drive from a casino that allows them to, play blackjack, do whatever. And that's different. I get it. That's a different deal than betting on sports. Can't do that. Yeah. They can go play blackjack, right? Here, Riverside, where we're at, Riverside's a casino, 25 minutes south of Iowa City that, any Iowa athlete could go.
They do.
Go up to a table and play. So it's just become more generally accepted. Like I don't think anyone's going to scoff if they're walking through a casino and they see, a college athlete wagering on a craps table or whatever. The NIL part of it, now they have money to, maybe significant money to try to wager. So maybe that's a little scary. But can that be a pathway into the next level up? And I think all of that is kind of scary.
Exactly, because you worry about gateway drugs, you worry about gateway gambling. That they go to the casino, they play blackjack, or and now they have a lot of disposable income, and
they're competitive.
Yeah,
I mean, you get a juice out of winning. I mean, guys that are competitive, and I say guys in a general sense, it could include women too. But you win a hand of blackjack, you get if you're a highly competitive person, you want that feeling again, and so it can become an addictive situation.
Absolutely, and I grew up. I grew up in Burlington, Iowa, which is right on the Mississippi River, and when I was a junior or senior in high school, we had river boats, and they were off of them, and so you could be 18. So now I didn't have enough money to go out very often, but I did go a few times, and a couple of times it didn't work out real well for me, But that, I think you do have to be concerned about that, and you just don't want them in the sports book. And I remember how hard line it was just a few years ago when I was writing every day practically about the Iowa and Iowa State situation, and you have these these athletes who they know their teammates. You don't want them betting on, at that time you couldn't bet on the pros if they sponsored that sport at the college level. And some of the justification was, it's like, hey, I'm a senior at Iowa and my buddy's a rookie in the NFL, and he's like, yeah, dude, our quarterback's hurt, he's not going to play this week, and then all of a sudden you're betting.
Right.
Or basketball games, it's like athletes, men's basketball and football players get along, usually hang out, sometimes they're roommates, and it's like, yeah, he's hurt, he's not going to play, and then use that to your advantage. But I don't know how much of that goes on and how much of that you can police, but I do know that anytime anybody it needs to be explicit. Yeah. You touch it, you bet on your team, frankly, your sport. I think you should be done.
That's a problem. Well, we probably won't solve anything with that. You just hope that guys are smart and that they can be disciplined if they are gambling on whether it's a blackjack hand or whatever, but that it doesn't leak into betting in sports for sure. All right, let's talk about the 2014 playoff. You, within the last couple of weeks, did a rather large, in-depth story on this proposal that the playoff could go to 24. It's 12 right now. There's thought that it could go to 16. There's certain powers within college athletics, including TV. Some TV wants it, some don't. There's some vested interest in that. PJ Fleck last week, we had him on this very podcast, and of course he's in favor. It can be a good thing for a place like Minnesota. You can be in the playoff discussion in November. The way it used to be, PJ Fleck would talk about, we want to get into November with a chance to win the West. And now the divisions are gone, so that carrot is gone a little bit. With an 18-team stack with no divisions, you can get in November with a pretty good record and not have much to play for anymore. I think a 2014 playoff is good for a place like Minnesota, good for a place like Iowa, good for a place like Wisconsin, now that there's no divisions. Yeah. And if it goes to 24, the title game's out, right, which is fine. That's been rendered meaningless now with the 12-team playoff. Yeah. So PJ Fleck's in favor of it. That shouldn't be surprising. I agree with the head coach. And I know now you do too. You're fighting a one-man battle with the within the Athletic because all of your colleagues who cover it nationally, and there is some opposition to this idea of a 2014 playoff. So let's start again. Just first of all, how can people read the article that you did and the deep research with some real specific numbers on why you think it's a good idea? How can they get that? And then tell me kind of the thesis behind it.
Yeah, I put together, I think it was 2 weeks ago, a column that said this isn't going to hurt college football, it's going to save college football. And we have like company Slack channels, and it became, I would argue with specifically Stu Mandel and Joe Rexrode, who are kind of more of our commentary writers, and they were adamantly, they hate it in every single way possible. And I'm like, I think this will be the best thing that ever happened to the sport. Yeah. And there's so many reasons, as you know, and I'll definitely get into it. And part of it is when the playoff went from 4 teams to 12, it really created a divide, to me, in the postseason between what is an excellent season and what is just an average season. And teams now, it's like if you don't get in the playoff, everything's meaningless. And even though it was still great to go to bowl games a few years ago, but you get closer and closer to the end of the season, and you've got 2 7-4 teams playing towards the end, or 2 8-3 teams. Think of the Axe game or something. It's happened before where the Big Ten West was at stake. That had real value, real money involved in that. In the future, if they're both 8-3, and you have a chance to go to the playoff, that has real value.
The winner of that, if they're both 8-3, the winner of that game's almost assured of a playoff spot out of the Big Ten. Minnesota and Wisconsin last week. Here, as we record this in Iowa, the Black Friday game annually now, if Nebraska and Iowa are 8-3, the winner of that game last year is going to Nashville. Yeah. The winner of that game in 3 years, if it's a 2014 playoff, is going to the friggin' playoffs.
Exactly.
And now some people, I think, Scott, will say, well, this is just blue ribbons for everybody now. It's a participation trophy. The 23rd team in the country doesn't deserve it. You gotta earn your way in to get to the 12. I do think there's some validity to that, but I think it's trumped by the idea that I do think there's a limit. I think 24 is probably it. Yeah. I wouldn't want 32. I certainly wouldn't want basketball at 64. Yeah. I mean, I like basketball at 64, but I don't think football should go to there. But I think 24 is a pretty good compromise because it includes and it helps promote the sport. Like you say, it's potentially going to save the sport in terms of high-level TV interest and money and fan interest.
Exactly. And here are some of the factors. And couple last year with 3 weeks to go in the regular season, Chris Vanini, who does an excellent job of ranking every team in the country for us, had in his poll there were 35 power conference teams with 3 losses or less going into the final 3 weeks of the regular season. out of his poll for the 12-team playoff, his top 9 plus number 12 made it. And then if it would have been a 16-team playoff, his top 14 plus the 2 group of 5 teams would have made it. That means that 60% of those teams that have 3 losses or less, their games are meaningless. If you're the 22nd best team and you've got 3 losses, whatever you do in the final quartile of the season doesn't matter. You're playing for a bowl spot. And to me, this is the best regular season in sports. We all kind of come to that conclusion. This makes it better. In week 10, in the last week of the season last year, there were 10 games that had direct impact, or would have had direct impact on a 24-team field. The field, not just slotting. So teams like Pitt playing Miami. Now, Miami got in because it had to beat Pitt, but if Pitt would have won in a 24-team playoff, it gets in.
Yeah.
Wake Forest and Duke. Iowa and Nebraska. Iowa would have gotten in last year as the 24 team, or as a 23 seed, and it would have been the only 4-loss team in the field. But I also look at things like the 2019 season, and this was one that really kind of turned me in this. There is not much difference when you start to compare resumes between teams like 10 or 11 and down to 20. And in that year in particular, and I highlighted these 3 teams, Penn State was the number 10 team, Iowa was 16, and Minnesota was 18. Penn State and Minnesota at that end of the season were 10-2. Iowa was 9-3. They played each other round robin. It was all within 5 points.
And they were all 1-1, right?
Yeah, exactly. Iowa won by 4. I think Minnesota won by 4 or 5, and Penn State beat Iowa by 5. And so, who's better? They're all the same.
Yeah.
And then you look across the board, and it's like, oh, there are other teams that have similar flaws. So to me, if you're going to go to 16, you're really going to Sophie's choice this. You're going to really have to pick, well, what's the difference? And now we've got 18-team leagues, the Big Ten, 16-team leagues. And the schedules are so vastly different in the Big Ten. Think of Indiana 2 years ago. Good team, by the way, but their schedule was pretty light.
Yep.
And then you think of Iowa last year that, had a really good team, but, played Oregon and Indiana right down to the very end. If they didn't play them, they might have been 10-2, and they would have been in a playoff situation. So I think when you look at all these teams and you say, how do we know that this 9-3 team in the Big Ten is better than this 10-2 team in the Big Ten when they've only played 4 of the similar opponents, and then you try to compare it to the SEC or the Big 12 or the ACC or even a group of 5 team, you just don't know. So I think at this point it's like the best thing to do is go 24. And then the other factor is this year alone there are 34 games on campus between power conference teams. Minnesota's got a great one, I think, in Mississippi State coming up this year, and Iowa plays Iowa State traditionally in these games. But if they were to play the first 2 rounds on campus, is what this would be, that's at minimum like 14 games featuring power conference teams on campus in early December. You could have Florida playing at Michigan or Missouri playing at Minnesota or something like that. And man, the interest, the interest down the stretch if you have these games.
And how about, I think it added in, like how about Florida coming to Michigan, like you said, or Iowa or Minnesota or Madison, whoever might get in, and it's 6 degrees.
Yeah, right.
That's beautiful. like for SEC won't come north anyway, so maybe this playoff forces some of that. And you think about it, interest level, because I had heard this argument against a 24-team playoff. Well, Ohio State would have a bid locked up with 3 weeks left. No one's going to care about Ohio State the rest of the way. My argument is, well, 1, they're playing for a bye. 2, it's only going to increase interest because the seeding situation becomes pretty valuable. Like if you can be the 1 seed, I mean, they played Michigan the last week. If they lose that game, they might not even get a bye. They might not. I mean, they'll probably host. But you know what I'm saying? There is. You're telling me Ohio State with a clinch playoff spot's not going to have people interested in their game? Stop it. I mean, half the Big Ten likely, so that's 18 teams, and without the divisions for the last couple of years. Half the Big Ten, well, more than half the Big Ten, had nothing but I hope we get to the Music City Bowl, or I hope we get to the Citrus Bowl. They had, when it was the East and the West, 3 or 4 teams that, were going into November had a shot to get to the Big Ten championship game, which then gave you a path to the Rose Bowl or the playoff or what have you. That isn't the case now with an 18 team. We're just going to take the 2 best. And you mentioned the scheduling. Well, now, if it's a 24-team playoff on November 1st, 9 at least of those teams, and probably more, are going to go into November saying, "Ooh, we go 4-0. We're in the postseason, or we're in the playoffs." And there's no way that isn't going to be better from a TV standpoint, an interest standpoint, a ticket sales standpoint. A place like Minnesota still has to worry about selling tickets in November. Like, I get it. Here in Iowa City, which is 6 miles from where we're at, and Nebraska, they're sold out. Fine. There are other places that you need to make things matter. You need to have important, impactful games late if you're going to sell it, particularly in cold weather, to get people to come out. So, man, I'm in favor of it. PJ last week was in favor of it. And I get coaches are going to do that, and people will poo-poo. Well, of course he wants to be in the playoffs at 9-3. Does 9-3 deserve it? And I think that, to me, is the biggest. Like, does 9-3 deserve it? I don't know, but why not? Like, why does somebody got to climb on that? I mean, there's a lot of hills to die on. To me, 9-3, not 9. Well, that doesn't stop it. Like, let them go. See what happens. Some 9-3 team could be a Cinderella. Who knows?
It's good football. I mean, it's interesting football. It's on campus, and it's between, conceivably evenly matched teams in the first weekend, and then you have the second weekend, which would be and I've heard all arguments of Ohio State, Michigan, and I've bounced back. I said it actually has more importance. Part of it is without a championship game that they have not played a winner-take-all game for the Big Ten title since 2007. Because they've been in the same division for the most part. And you don't want a rematch, and luckily they never had one. So I think in some ways it makes it better that, then, they're going to rest their guys. No, they're not. I covered, the Ohio State when they won the national title, and to talk to them, the players, about losing to Michigan just killed them. And let's face it, they lost to Michigan, then they went on and won the national title. So it's kind of inconsistent to try to say that, this game doesn't matter. Well, it didn't matter officially 2 years ago, but it mattered personally for them. And I think you look at across the board that 80 different programs would have made the playoff over the life of the 12-year life of the CFP if it would have been a 24-team field. You look at Minnesota in 19. You look at Illinois in, I think it was 24. Iowa would have made it 6 times. And you just feel like how these teams would have been shaped differently in their mental framework, what they could take to the off season, and then if they get deep in the playoff. And so I like it a lot, and I think it sells itself. The bowls I still think have value, and what is it's a preliminary discussion right now, but what I was told is that they'd take the 10 bowls that don't really fit in the playoff, and then each conference would pool in their 5 or so teams that didn't make the playoff. They're 8-4, 7-5 teams, and then they'd allow those bowls to kind of select teams rather than just, okay, you're third in the Big Ten, you're going to the Music City Bowl, or you're going to the Outback Bowl, or whatever. And I think that's really smart, because then you can get diversity, diverse play, location, opponent, and if you're like a Nebraska and you're 7-5, and it's like, all right, well, we're going to have you play Missouri or Iowa State. It's like, okay, and we'll play it at a different spot, So I think, and if you're 7-5, you don't deserve to be in the playoff anyway. 8-4 is a little bit more on the
depending
border.
on the schedule, and you're right.
So there's so much I like about it.
How many times in the last 10 years would Nebraska have been in the playoff?
Zero.
I just had to ask.
They are, in fact, I think I have that charted where I have, I think there's 7 power conference teams that wouldn't have made it. And there's 4 in the Big Ten.
So Minnesota would have made it in 19 and just missed in 14.
Yeah, that's right.
You said in the last 10 years, Iowa was in 6 times?
12 years.
12 years. 12 years, sorry. That was 12 years was your frame of reference. And in Ohio State, would they have been 12 for 12?
Yeah.
Michigan.
Here's the top teams. Alabama and Ohio State would have made it every year.
Okay.
Clemson 11, Georgia 10, Notre Dame 10, and kind of go down. Michigan would have been 8, Oregon 8, Penn State 7, Iowa 6, USC 7. Kind of skipping around here. Oklahoma 9. So there would have been a lot. I mean, of the conferences, it would have been the SEC would have had 82, the Big Ten would have had 72. Kind of down from there, and then the Big Ten would have had 4 teams that wouldn't have made it. Nebraska didn't come close, neither did Maryland or Rutgers. But Purdue, the year that it won the division, it was
Jeff
outside.
Brom,
it was outside, but it might have, if who knows? I mean, not getting beat by Michigan might have propelled them into it. So, and then the other 4 were Boston College, Duke, which won the ACC last year, so maybe it would have, California and Kansas.
Gotcha. So it includes everybody. And again, I think there's something that happens with people that don't want somebody to get something they don't think they deserve. Mm-hmm. And where's the line from that? Like where is the line? So to me, in general, you said 80 teams in the last 12 years are in it at least once. Mm-hmm. I think about this now. COVID really did short circuit for a short period of time a bunch of teams. Minnesota coming off 2019, and they were, that next season would have been pretty much sold out before the start. Well, then now no fans can come. A couple of the Gophers' best players opt out, and all of a sudden they have kind of a crummy year during the COVID. Lose an overtime game at Wisconsin to end it. No fans, cold. It was in December. Remember, the season got pushed back, and so you almost had to. It wasn't a total restart, but you kind of had to, put the jumper cables on anyway. And it's unfortunate. But let's say that COVID doesn't hit in 2019. If Minnesota makes the playoffs with that team, one, there's a chance they can win a game or two because that was a really good team. They had Rashad Bateman, Daniel Fa'alele, a lot of NFL guys, Tyler Johnson, Tanner Morgan, the quarterback. He was on this podcast 2 weeks ago. We didn't talk about the 2014 playoff, but if people want to go back, we talked about the Gophers and some of his career.
They would have played at Notre Dame.
At Notre Dame. What a great matchup. Like the Gopher fans in my time now, I've been just finished year 20. In the last 12 to 15 years, the Gopher fans have traveled pretty well. And now look, going to Notre Dame, they're not probably going to give up a lot of tickets, but people would have loved that matchup. I'd love to see Minnesota and Notre Dame play home and home. I don't know if Minnesota's cachet is enough for them to schedule that. Notre Dame, I'm talking. Minnesota would love, I think, that. But that's a great game. And I don't remember in 19 just how good they were, but that Gopher team was pretty good. Yeah. They beat Auburn, who was at one point in that year ranked in the top 5. And exactly. I don't know where Auburn ended up in I'm guessing they would have been in the playoffs that year.
Yeah, they would have been 12. And that's kind of my point in that year, that Minnesota beats Auburn in the Outback Bowl. But Auburn was ranked 12th in the final CFP. Minnesota was 18th. How do we know?
Right. And where was Notre Dame if they
were 15th?
15th. So Minnesota beat the 12 Auburn. And so to say they couldn't have beaten Notre Dame. Anyway, my point is, had the COVID not hit the next year, the momentum, so just one appearance can be a difference maker in the playoffs a little bit. Because let me tell you, when the Gophers beat Auburn, we were down in Tampa, and there was lots of Gopher fans there, and they were doing the row chant and all this stuff. I'm like, man, this thing, PJ promised this stuff. He said fans would be all bought in. It was there, and then the trapdoor kind of fell out for a minute, and he has made this a very consistent program. I think they would, obviously everybody would like to get a double-digit win season soon, just to kind of get that thing going and get back into a playoff. But my point is, 80 teams getting in, the boost that can give a team just creates interest. It creates TV. It creates, selfishly, like from where I come from, the Gophers and the Hawkeyes and the Cornhuskers, they need radio people to advertise. You make a playoff every now and then. Guess what? The car dealer decides I'm going to sponsor that, and it's good for everybody. And I don't believe that it's a participation trophy. One, you and I are around. These guys are working. If you're 2-9. This isn't just like sloughing along. If you're a Division I Big Ten football player, the work they put in, 9-3, if you're in the playoffs, you've earned it, in my opinion. And I'm in favor of 24.
Yeah, and I look at again, when you have these big conferences and all these teams have a real similar type of resume, it's really hard to determine who's better and who's not.
I mean, Notre Dame last year.
Yeah.
Like there's models that run if they'd have if they run a 16-team playoff, and let's say Notre Dame gets in, and you run a model, Notre Dame wins the national title like 7 out of 40 times or something, and they don't even get in.
Yeah, they would have been, to me, they would have been the biggest threat to Indiana. Yeah, across the board, they were that good with that running game and an ascending quarterback and things, and they couldn't even get in. And so I kind of made the joke to one person. I said the 10th best team in the country couldn't even get in the playoff, but the 10th best team in the Big Ten can get in play for a national championship in basketball. So I think that's something we really come in mind. But if you look at like the Big Ten, places like Michigan State would have made it 4 times. Wisconsin, Northwestern would have made it 4 times.
What's Wisconsin's 4 times?
Yeah, 4 times
in the last 12 years. Yeah. Their 2017 team almost made the 4 team. 2016 playoff, right?
Right.
They were really good. Yeah.
They were undefeated in the regular season and then lost a pretty close game, kind of like Iowa in 15. Lost to Ohio State by like 6 points or something like that, and they won their bowl game, and so I mean theirs were a little earlier, 14 through 19, and then they've of course, as we know, fallen off.
And you mentioned the there's 34 head-to-head, Power 4 non-conference on campus. It's become in vogue to, hey, let's go play at the Mercedes-Benz Stadium or someplace. And Lambeau Field, look, that's pretty cool. Notre Dame at Lambeau with Wisconsin. I'm not that's fine. But to get some on-campus intersectional, I can't wait. If it gets to, well, it still could happen now. But you get a South team coming north in December.
Oh yeah,
it'd be great. Like even UCLA coming to Minnesota in early November. I'm really curious to see if that. I'm kind of hoping it's 8 degrees just to see what happens. Right, those California kids think they're ready for cold weather until they hit it. Right. So anyway,
it hits different in Minnesota as we know. But I mean, and then you look at the beauty of playing on campus is that you get to experience that environment that you normally wouldn't.
Yes.
Especially, I mean, I think we could all agree that the SEC and the Big Ten have the best environments in football, no question about it. And I covered the game Tennessee at Ohio State 2 years ago, and there were like 40,000 Vols fans who made that trek. They were able to sneak in through the computer system and get their tickets. But they took over the town. It was the first time they'd ever visited Ohio State, and it's only like a 6-hour drive, and yet it was the first time they were there. Can you imagine a Big Ten team going to Death Valley at LSU on a Saturday night and for a playoff game? It's like, wow, this is cool. Or going to a whiteout.
Michigan LSU, that's going to get a 36 rating on whoever carries the game, Fox or whoever, right?
Coming to Iowa City and doing the wave, seeing the jump around at Camp Randall, the whiteout at Penn State, going to the Grove and tailgating at Ole Miss.
Yeah.
I mean, just all these seeing the 12th man and the dance, the swaying or whatever they do at Texas A&M and the hedges. I mean, all these, to me, college football separates itself from every other sport in this country because of two things: incredible fans and fan support, and the cathedrals that they play in.
Yeah.
And when you could bottle that up and provide more of an opportunity to go and do this, I think you got to take advantage of it.
I think you and I know PJ Fleck. Has Kirk Ferentz publicly said anything?
Yeah, he's more in the line of, okay, I guess we'll just do it. Kind of Kirk. But his idea, and I do think that this makes sense. If you want the regular season to be and to lead directly into the best team across the board, he thought 18 was the way to go. And then it's like when they went to 12. Well, first he goes, when they went to 4, I thought that wasn't enough, and then they went to 12, and then and so
you're saying 8 teams, not 18.
Yeah,
8. He thought 8 teams. Yeah.
8 teams.
Yeah.
And so I think he's probably got a point to that, which would mean every major conference champion and the top 2 or 3 teams that may be competing in it. But as we said, there's not a lot of difference between the 10 and 2 teams. Yeah. There's not, I mean, Notre Dame was every bit as good as any team in the country, and they were 10 and 2. They lost their first 2 games by a total of like 4 points last year, and they didn't get in. Miami got in late, and then they went all the way to the championship. And Ohio State lost to Michigan, and then it won the championship. So, and Indiana was amazing. I mean,
what a story!
The greatest story. Yeah. The Kurt Warner story of college
a
football.
Team. What I like, because I think the championship games have now been rendered meaningless with where it's at. So I think the other subsidiary benefit is that the 24 team would just eliminate that. Where there are no championship games, you make up the money by adding the playoff games and probably make more money than the championship. Because some of these championship games even run at a loss anyway, right? I mean, the TV contract gives the conference money, but by the time you travel teams there and rent the facility and pay event staff, I think the ACC is losing money on their game. Big Ten, I don't know. They make money. So anyway, but it's not going to be as much money as if Notre Dame and Minnesota play in a playoff game, right?
Yeah, the way Tony Petitti kind of fashioned it, he said, losing collectively the championship games is about a $200 million loss. Yeah. And specifically, the SEC would lose the most, Big Ten would lose the second most, and then everybody else would lose a little or gain in some cases. Then But merely having these games on campus, 16 on-campus games where you charge, you fill up the stadium, that recoups about $80 million of that.
Yeah.
And so you're looking at, just to make it a break even, about $120 million from additional
TV rights,
TV revenues, and that. So I would expect that to grow up a little bit, and then once people see it in play, and again, I think it makes so much sense to do it right after the season, because you lose momentum when you're waiting a couple of weeks, and then the crazy part is the last 2 years when they went to 12 teams, only one team with a bye, Indiana, won.
Yeah.
They had to wait. They had sat out a month, before they played on January 1st, and so to get a bye, 1 week bye, other teams are playing right away, and you need to stay out of the NFL's way, because that's also a problem.
Yeah.
Because the NFL is, I always say that they're like your good-looking buddy that you went to the bar with, and then you're talking to a girl at the bar and you kind of like her, and then all of a sudden your good-looking buddy comes over and
I didn't do that.
ruins the day.
Well, the nice thing is they can set the dates after, like, the NFL schedule's out, right? Mm-hmm. By the time the 24 teams qualify, then you can set the dates to work around. Where, like, the NFL, and then the NFL, they can do whatever they want. They're now trying to claim Christmas, which was an NBA date, because they can. It is what it is. But we spent a lot of time on it. But I just think, what do you think a timeline might be? Do you think it's going to happen, first of all, and if so, when will the curtain be unveiled on it, if it does?
I think it's going to happen. It'll be probably this fall before it gets kind of official or finalized. As we know, the Big Ten, is unanimous in its support. And even talking to Ryan Day, where it was like, he goes, you can make the case that this doesn't necessarily benefit Ohio State, but it benefits the Big Ten. Yeah. So we're for it that way. Because, Ohio State would have made it every single 12-team playoff. They would have made it. But I think the SEC still needs time to kind of run through the figures. And
Don't you think ESPN's, because of the TV situation, is pounding the SEC to hold firm? Yeah. I mean, the SEC can say they're against it, but you're telling me the Mississippi State coach wouldn't love a 24-team playoff?
Exactly.
Or even Ole Miss, or come on, Missouri. I mean, what's her guy's name? Eli. You're saying he wouldn't love a 24-team? I think the commission. This is my own opinion. I think the commissioner, who's been brilliant in what they've been able to do with the SEC, is listening to his biggest TV partner. And for those that don't know, ESPN holds the rights currently, ESPN ABC, and if it advances to a 24-team playoff, then it either opens up totally or at least opens up, and they aren't the exclusive. If you're the exclusive playoff rights holder, you make a lot of money. Yeah. And if you're not, now you're maybe potentially splitting ad revenue, the credit card companies, the casinos, all this with another network. So my hunch is the SEC, if you gave truth serum to many of those coaches, they are in favor, and ADs, they're in favor.
Oh, for sure.
But I think ESPN's kind of beating the drum there. The ACC's like, screw it, we want 24, but,
The factor is that the coaches are for it, for sure. And and even the ADs in the SEC, like Greg Byrne with Alabama said, the championship games have reached their expiration. Yes. They don't really matter. And when you look at it from a financial perspective, if you're LSU or Penn State last year, as soon as James Franklin lost his third game, as soon as Brian Kelly lost his third game, they fired him because they're there to go to the playoff. Playoff chances are out, you're gone. Both of them were pretty good teams. I mean, Penn State lost 5 games by a score or less last year, and so they had a lot of aspirations. They didn't reach them. They made the change. Well, this will probably prolong some of that.
Sure,
and
that's true.
That it's like, well, we can still be patient. Now if they lose their 4th game, maybe you do it. But I do think that some of these teams are competitive enough that they get on a little bit of a run, and then they go from 5-3 to 9-3, and then they're in, and then maybe they do something because they got a lot of talent, and so I think that's another factor that they're looking at, is maybe saving some money on buyouts. Maybe that coach that you're contemplating firing goes on a run, they get in the playoff, and it's like, all right, well, we're going to keep him now.
Yeah.
You don't have to.
How do you fire a guy who just got us into the playoff, right?
Yeah. So I think that those are some of the side benefits of an expansion like this.
So if you think, the discussion will get will become more urgent, you think, in the fall, and then when do you think we'll actually see a 24-team field compete?
That's the biggest question to me. Is I do think they'll go to 24. I just don't know if it'll be 27 or 28.
Okay, so not that far. It's not like 32 or yeah.
I think it's probably comes down to more the SEC and how, what they do with the revenue and ESPN factor for the SEC championship, because it is lucrative for them. That is, the Big Ten championship's always been, last year was the best one ever because you had 1 versus 2 and it was a great game. And, but in the past I covered a few of them that weren't a little lopsided. So I would say that the SEC does have to figure out, okay, how do we recuperate that? And the Big Ten may have to come back. I think there's a couple of things that the SEC will probably want from the Big Ten to get that approval. I think number one, and most importantly to me, is the Big Ten everybody used to schedule 1 power conference opponent to go with their 9 league games, and then they backed off of that. Indiana, Penn State, and Nebraska this year doesn't do it. I could see the SEC saying everybody's got to do it. And Big Ten should say, we'll do it. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I think that's one. And then you might have to sweeten the pot for them a little bit too, and then rightly so, because they're losing more out of that championship game than everybody else.
Yeah, and they have been king of football for a long time. Now the Big Ten owns it now.
Yes, absolutely.
And there's reasons for that. But the SEC carried the water for a long time for a lot of revenue-driven situations for a lot of folks. Real quickly, we're with Scott Dochterman. Let me talk about one of our great sponsors here on our podcast. It is time once again to get on the water as we're moving from spring into summer. And for that best bite, use OnX Fish from OnX Maps. It's everything you need to get there, get on the fish, and it's all in one app. You can find out about boat ramps, launches, lake access points, public versus private land ownership, points of interest. Where's a bait shop? Is it near the lake? Well, here it is. Camping as well, all built into a single app. No more scrambling around, fumbling around for different info from different apps or having to go onto a computer or your laptop. You can get it right on your phone. No outdated reports. It's all updated daily. Fish new lakes like they're your home waters. You can go to OnX Fish. It gives you proven fishing data and local insights that used to take you years and years to learn. You can get 10 years of knowledge on a lake in about 10 minutes of thumbing through the OnX Fish app. Download OnX Fish at the App Store or visit onxmaps.com/fish. Spring fishing moving into summer. It's here. Go find the lake you've been driving past for years and finally find out if it's worth the launch, and happy fishing to you.
Know what the happiest bird is? Chicken. Cub fried chicken. Wait, let me rephrase that. Know what bird makes people happiest? Cub fried chicken. Crispy, crunchy, juicy, perfectly seasoned. It's the kind of chicken that disappears faster than you can say, 8-piece, please. Or, let's be real, maybe 12-piece. Because when it comes to fried chicken, more just means more happy. So if you're shopping chicken, shop Cub fried chicken and shop happy.
Hey Gopher fans, Jalen Crocker-Johnson here from Minnesota men's basketball. In basketball, wins come from preparation, trust, and executing when it matters the most. That's how True North Mergers and Acquisitions approaches selling your businesses. True North M&A is a local alumni-owned company and a proud sponsor of Gopher Athletics, helping businesses of all sizes make winning moves. Thinking about selling? True North's M&A helps maximize your life's work and close strong in crunch time. Visit tnma.com for confidential conversation.
Episode 225, we've got a few minutes left here with Scott Dochterman. We're coming to you from North Liberty, Iowa, where Scott lives. We won't give your home address or anything, but we appreciate you spending some time here. We're at Field Day Brewing, just kind of hanging out. We haven't hit the beer yet. We're doing pop right now, but we had some wings, and you had a burger. Pretty good food here as well, so it's kind of fun. A couple of quick things in regard to just the Big Ten here in the fall. Ohio State and Oregon, are they your 2 best teams, you think, in the Big Ten?
And Indiana.
And you throw them in, okay. Even with losing the Heisman Trophy winner.
Yeah, imagine that. Indiana, first of all, it's hard to get out of my mouth. Indiana, the national champion, 16-0, Heisman Trophy winner, and Fernando Mendoza. But they bring back a lot of players from a really good team, and then they were very selective and smart. I'm interested to see how Hoover does at quarterback and replacing Fernando Mendoza. That's going to be the key to me. Whether I think they're a borderline playoff team already, but I think if they can go ahead and take that step with him, and they might be competitive again. And then Ohio State, they lost a lot of players, but they're Ohio State.
Yeah, they're like IBM. They just producing year after year, right?
And Oregon, to me, is my favorite right now.
Same, I agree. I mean, their defensive line, I mean, all four of the starters and maybe a backup all would have been first or second round picks, and somehow they pass on that money. So I don't know what their roster costs right now, but I like them. They obviously got talent. Their quarterback's amazing. Gopher fans saw that firsthand last year with a couple of throws that kid made, and so I agree with you on that. From the Indiana standpoint, we mentioned, who would have thought this? It's like you said, we're 30 miles from where Kurt Warner played high school football, and 60 or 80 miles from where he played college football. And it's the team version of that. It's the Cinderella story. I was joking I made the joke a lot. Indiana loses in the Big Ten basketball tournament in Chicago in the first round, which in essence knocks them out of the NCAA. And I'd made the joke on the air. I'm like, well, who cares in Bloomington? Spring football starts next week. And who would have ever thought that after a team, Hoosier team gets knocked out? But I spent some time with their longtime radio guy, Don Fisher, a couple of weeks ago. We had our little Big Ten annual impromptu golf get-together. And Don Fisher's still on cloud nine, 53 years, play-by-play guy, 50 years separating him calling the undefeated 1976 Quinn Buckner, Kent Benson, Bob Knight national title team 50 years later through all kinds of horrendous football teams. Like literally the worst power team record-wise up through, 2 years ago. And then Kirk Cignetti, 62-year-old Kirk Cignetti shows up. And I remember when he got hired, it was like, he's had some success. He was, D2 for a while and whatever. And then 16-0, maybe the greatest single season in the history of football when you factor the whole story. Unbelievable.
It's really hard to get your mind around it because I've been there so many times in the past where they would have like Hoosier hysteria on a Friday night, and there'd be 22,000 people showing up for this event at Assembly Hall, and then there'd be 22,000 people there for the football game the next day.
And by halftime, 12,000.
Yeah, right.
Yes.
And then to be there the last couple of years, I covered 5 Indiana games last year, and the first one was Illinois, Indiana, and that was one of those games where, I was going to write from the game no matter what, but then I was going to stick around. Whoever won, I was either going to go to Champaign or I was going to stay in Bloomington and write about the winner, kind of a bigger picture story. And then, of course, oh my God, it was 63-10. And it just, it's a machine. But he, Cignetti, you can't minimize at all the coaching job he did. I think you look at a couple other factors it's the confluence of so many events at the same time that he took advantage of, because I was thinking if this happened in 2018 and he was hired,
zero chance.
No, he can't bring in his own players. He can't go buy them. And if you're in Indiana and you recruit the Chicagoland, are you going to get an offensive tackle who's going to go to Wisconsin or Iowa or Michigan, let alone Michigan or Notre Dame? No way. So it'll take you multiple years just to get yourself in a position to compete, let alone do something like this.
Yeah, it was a confluence of a bunch of. Because I even look at PJ's when he comes off the 13-0 regular season at Western, gets hired at Minnesota in 2017. There's literally not a quarterback on the roster that can play Big Ten football, so they have to go in. He has to beg Connor Rhoda, who was a walk-on, to come back to at least get him through spring ball. They whiffed on a junior college quarterback they thought would and it just didn't work out. He ended up being a linebacker.
Year zero, right?
Yeah, year zero, and it was that. There was some, but I'm thinking if it were then, and look, who knows? This is not to take anything away from Cignetti. I mean, I'm not trying to say, well, if only this or that, but I think there is some legitimacy. If Cignetti got hired in 2017, it's a problem. It isn't going to happen like it did. PJ could have brought, I think there were like 6 guys off that Western Michigan team that get drafted. So if he brings 13 or 15 guys from that 13-0 Western Michigan team with him, and then goes and gets a quarterback, somebody, like I'm talking, at that point, PJ was a hot name. Right. He could have gotten some transfer from, it seems like SMU has a transfer quarterback come to the Big Ten someplace. Whoever. I'm not suggesting that it would have been what Kirk Cignetti did, but I am suggesting that it wouldn't have been whatever it was, 5-7 in year one, and then a fight in year two. Just in the middle of that year, it was, is this the right deal? And then They end up beating Purdue in a blowout, which that was a good Purdue team, and then won the Axe for the first time in 15 years, and the rest they beat Georgia Tech and on down the road. But I'm not predicting that would have happened, but it is a different time. So and a soft schedule for Cignetti as well in that first year. So that said, that guy is unbelievable. I mean,
the differences between him and other coaches. I mean, you would expect an offensive-minded coach like him will come in and maybe be able to do things offensively, but are they going to be able to handle line of scrimmage play? Are they going to be able to play good defense? And they did, and their fundamentals were impeccable. Yeah. And you look around the Big Ten, I think, where we're sitting, Iowa, Minnesota, and Indiana certainly, they're very fundamentally based. They perfect the small details, and that's what makes them effective overall. And if you look at, you bring up a good point. I hadn't really thought about that before, but in 2017, had PJ been able to bring the guts of his roster at Western Michigan, go out and get a couple other pieces, the way he coaches fundamentals, yes, that team could have went right in and been very competitive. Yeah. I mean, Wisconsin was really good that year. They were 12-0, but in the Big Ten. But there's no saying that they couldn't have.
Right. And on the flip side, there's no saying what other rosters with the rules would have been. Maybe they wouldn't have been that competitive. Yeah. But that said, it wouldn't have been 5-7. Yeah. It would have been better than that. Yeah. But it is what it is. You deal the hand you're dealt, and man, Curt Cignetti has played that hand as well as any coach in a 2-year stretch in the history of college football. Think about that. Yeah. Next tier of teams, we'll breeze through this a little bit. Where are your next tier then after that 3? I guess if you look at the rankings, you've got USC, Michigan, maybe Iowa, Penn State. Washington's got a pretty good quarterback. How do you view it?
It's really going to depend about schedule.
Yeah, I
really think that schedule plays a real role, and like Ohio State could be the best team in the country, but they have the most difficult schedule in Big Ten history.
Is that right?
Their combined record of the teams from last year, 51-30.
Wow. From
last year, Minnesota, for instance, is 39-42.
Yeah. And I think that's still a tough. I mean, when I look at it, because if it was 5 years ago, you're looking through the schedule. Well, Indiana, Indiana, no big deal. Well, now it's a big deal. You're probably not going to win that game.
It's a little different, but whereas like you compare that to even Michigan 40-41 and teams like that. So I think USC is one where they have a dynamic offense. Good return quarterback. Mayava and Lincoln Riley is an outstanding technician on that side of the ball. Can they do something on the defensive side of the ball with Gary Patterson as the DC? If they can, then they might be in that category. Washington is intriguing to me because, and this is kind of a test of the new system, because DeMond Williams tried to enter the portal and he tried to do it at the time of a funeral of an athlete that really didn't go over very well among his teammates and everybody there. Can they put that behind them? They're saying the right things, but you don't know.
And there was lawsuits potentially involved with that, right? I mean, the whole thing. Yeah,
it was ironclad. Now, Penn State. You want to talk about
Iowa State East, right?
Yeah, right. You took 22 guys from Iowa State. Now they were all pretty good players, and they were pretty good roster.
Pre-injury, that team was borderline playoff maybe team. At least they could have been in the conversation, Iowa State last year.
Yeah, they had a ton of injuries in the secondary that really cost them, and they were 8-4, and then they didn't play in the bowl game. They were probably as good as 2 or 3 in the Big 12. Yeah. So they were in the 10-win category before the injuries. And the players that they took, Rocco Becht, who's a really veteran quarterback, Ben Bramer, who's as good as any tight end in the country, and a lot of other guys. So and then
the Gophers play at Penn State this year, so people will be interested for that. Yeah,
I love that because I know Matt and PJ went head to head for a lot of recruits, and so I think there's a little bit of a fun friction there between those two. But Penn State has a really easy schedule, one of the easiest in the Big Ten. In fact, other than Wisconsin, it is the easiest. So they're, again, last year, other than the Ohio State game, they were right there in every single loss. So do they flip it? Do they have a little bit better play here and there, and they have an outstanding coach? They could be 10-2, and you're like, oh, wow, okay, they're good.
10-2 got James Franklin fired.
Yeah.
No, I'm just kidding.
Right. Iowa is last year. They got the trophy. It's like winning the beauty contest, second prize. They played everybody tough, but they lost. And they've got two big questions to me. Quarterback. Mark Gronowski played really well for them for the last half of the season, and they've got two guys that were transfers the year before who are backups who are battling, and that may go all the way to the end of August.
Let me ask you about that real quick, because Iowa's won a lot of games with some pretty bad quarterback play in the last 5 or 6 years. And I don't know, they haven't named a starter yet, right, Iowa?
No, it's going to take to the end of.
So if it's, where do you think that falls in the spectrum of? Do you think that they're going to get good quarterback play, or do you think? And if they don't, then how will that impact?
It's so fascinating because the guy who's got the edge, I would say at this point, who moved up from 3 to 2 in the middle part of the season is Jeremy Hicklinski, who was a redshirt freshman last year. He came from Wake Forest, and he's about 5'10", and he's legitimately like 5'10".
Yeah.
He's not any taller than that, but he's kind of a gunslinger. For people might remember, he's like Drew Tate.
Okay.
So he's got a little spunk to him, got a little fire, and I think he's probably slightly got the edge. But then the other guy is Hank Brown, who started a couple games at Auburn, tall Chicago kid, area kid for initially, big arm, kind of the prototype that you think for Kirk. But Hicklinski moves the team, so I think that's part of it. They're better than Deacon Hill, if you want to use that as the standard.
Yeah, poor Deacon.
Poor Deacon.
Man.
Yeah, we all saw him.
How about any jumpers? Any surprise dark horse teams you look at in the Big Ten?
I think the team that I don't know how to grasp them is Wisconsin.
Yeah.
Because the things that surprised me about first of all, they played the toughest schedule in the Big Ten.
That was an unbelievable schedule.
Their month of October was Michigan, Iowa, Ohio State, and Oregon. They got shut out. Iowa shut out.
Who was it? Did they have LSU? Who was their preseason? Or they had a non-conference game that was pretty tough too, right?
Alabama,
that's right. Yeah.
And then this year it's Notre Dame right off the bat.
Yeah.
But the thing that concerned me mostly about them last year was that they were just so fundamentally unsound.
Yep.
Which you knew what you would get from the old school Wisconsin, that they were going to, there's going to be big 330-pound pulling guards that were going to come down and smash you, and they had a 4-star elite running back, and their defense was always so gap sound that you just felt like you just couldn't get anywhere with them. And there was complete opposite the last couple of years. And so he went in the portal. He got a lot of good pickups. There's not, Wisconsin's got a lot of issues on campus. They don't have a chancellor, a president, or an athletic director. And Luke Fickell's kind of on that, dead coach walking if he doesn't play his cards right. But they also have the easiest schedule in the Big Ten, if not in the country, where Big Ten opponents were 28-53 last year.
Did they avoid all the big three we talked about? Ohio State.
Yeah,
Oregon and Indiana.
Their 3 toughest games at Penn State, USC at home, and then at Iowa. Yeah. And then, Minnesota will be tough too. So, if they don't get to 7 wins this year, I think you got to walk away.
Right.
I just don't think, and he's got a lot of good recruits, which in the past he didn't.
They're crushing right now, recruiting, right, is what I'm told. I don't follow recruiting that much, but every time I flip on Twitter, all these Badger folks are saying that they're crushing. So,
yeah, after getting smoked in state last year.
Last couple years, yeah.
I think it was the last year's class where they had like one of the top 14 guys in the state of Wisconsin. And I know from talking to a few guys around here, they were like, that was a place where you were lucky to get 1 or 2 of a good guy. You had to really be in on, and I know Minnesota's had some more success there. And and
I think they even have some guys right now committed. All right, let me ask you about Minnesota. When the lines start coming out, the over-unders on wins, it came out at 5.5. I think enough people now apparently have bet that the line has shifted to 6.5, so a full win, because I'm sure enough money came in to take the over 5.5, because I think the Gophers are going to make a bowl game. They'll get to 6, I think. I mean, again, as you mentioned, what the schedule is. I think it's hard, but the numbers show that they should be able to win some of those games. 6.5 probably makes it a tougher decision for some. What do you think of the Golden Gophers when you look at them and what they have and look at the schedule?
There are a lot of pieces I really like. I think, can Drake Lindsey take that next step? I mean, there are a lot of our NFL evaluators at The Athletic who think that he's got top 10 talent. And you could see flashes of that. Of course, I saw him on his worst day in Iowa City, and then the snow game at Minneapolis. You don't get much out of that, but he competed. I'll give him that. And so, can he take that next step forward? I think Jalen Smith is going to be a really good player. Obviously, if Darius Taylor stays healthy, he's a weapon. He's one of the best running backs in the country if he stays healthy. And then you have the guts of a pretty good offensive line coming back. So I think those elements should put them in a very competitive territory. Defensively, Anthony Smith, to me, I've told our guys at The Athletic he should be a first-team preseason All-American. Maverick Barnowski, was really good. A couple other guys in the secondary, but then there's the big holes. Can they fill the defensive tackle? And if they can, and you look at who they have, it's like the first three, Mississippi State at home will be interesting, but I think they're better than Mississippi State. Going to Washington's never easy. They got to really, and
their record is great at home. I mean, Washington, it's hard to win that. Iowa has a Friday night game there too, right? That's be interesting to see that one. Then that's each year I mentioned the Gopher fans have been traveling more and more, and I particularly see it. When it's one of the things of the West Coast edition is last year there were a lot of Gopher fans at Oregon that went out there because they never had a chance before. And I'll bet you if they can get their hands on tickets, there'll be a lot of Gopher fans in Seattle for that. That's a beautiful time to visit Seattle too, late September, Big Ten opener. So
for sure, it's an amazing place. From where I've never been there, but and the environment's probably, from what we've heard, kind of like Kinnick. I mean, it's a really tough place to play.
It's loud.
It's Husky Stadium. You got kind of the sound out there. I mean, meaning the waterways and stuff. And so, you got Washington and then you got Michigan back to back. Can you win one?
Yeah.
One of these years you got to win the jug, right?
Yeah, that would be nice.
Should have a couple years ago. But then of course PJ gets the "oops, we're sorry, we messed up" call. But
yeah, that was a tough one. And then before that, 2015 was a tough one. They thought Gophers thought they scored the go-ahead touchdown, and then the review put it at the 1 yard line, and two plays didn't do it, and the time ran out, and they ended up losing the game in 2015. That was, I don't know, Jim Harbaugh's first or second here, but. So would you take 6.5 over or under for Minnesota? It's a hard number, right?
Yeah, it's a hard number, and they all are pretty hard. I think in this case, I would take them over that.
I agree. Yeah.
I think there's, I would ballpark them at 7 and 5 with the opportunity to move up depending on how Drake Lindsey plays and how the health of Darius Taylor goes. If so, because the most pivotal game to me for sure is Iowa. There, I mean, for a lot of reasons. I mean, not only just the pig and the.
But you got them at home.
Yeah. It's in October. It's coming off a bye. It's before Indiana. It's kind of the chips are on the table. If you want to make a big push, you got to win that game. And then there are 4 kind of marquee opponents that if you can somehow find a split, Washington and Michigan, Michigan at home, and then later in the year, you go to Indiana. You can't really bet on anything there, and then at Penn State, which I think will be a challenging opponent as well as always is, and then of course your 2 big rivalry games, and so I think that they've got a chance, and then you just kind of wonder, like UCLA might be a bounce team. Because Bob Chesney has done a lot of great things so far, and it's like, oh, does UCLA get? Do they play well? Do they bounce up? I think Purdue's still struggling, so I don't know. That would be one. But then again, they gave you a tough fight, before.
Last year.
Northwestern, that's a 50-50 game.
It's always a tough one.
Yeah. So, it's going to be a challenging year, but, I think I have a lot of respect for PJ and what he's accomplished and how he puts his teams together and the toughness that they show and the adversity that they battle through. And I think that's something to me that, unless there's like a really bad injury situation, they're going to be there in the end. They're going to win a game or two, maybe that they shouldn't, and then or you don't think they should, and then they might find a way to lose a game or get beat bad by another.
You mentioned PJ. You did a story. Was that 2 years ago now? Yeah, you did a story on him. you came up and chatted and did a little more in-depth story. And I'd invite people. I'm sure if it's archived someplace.
Yeah.
It's a pretty. I liked the story. I know you took probably some heat from the locals here because it was a favorable.
Yeah.
I guess it was fair but favorable. I think
Mm-hmm.
in terms of how that was what you discovered. So take me through what you learned about PJ Fleck in researching, visiting, talking, and then writing and producing that story.
I always wanted to do something on PJ, big picture, and spend time with him and get to know him as the person that he is, and talk to him and ask him questions, the rumor questions about recruiting and all these.
And I should say, when I say the locals, if you're forgot, we're in. I don't mean the Minnesota locals who are listening. The local, Hawkeye and Cornhusker fans don't particularly care for PJ Fleck as whoever the coach is on your rival, right? Like Iowa fans or Minnesota fans aren't probably, Kirk Ferentz is probably not high on their list. It just is. That's what a rivalry is about. So I didn't want people saying, why would Gopher fans be mad at Scott for writing that story? The locals, meaning where we're recording this today in Iowa, the Hawkeye fans, I'm sure you got a tweet or two or a text or two from. Anyway, I wanted to clarify. I didn't mean to interrupt, but anyway, you wanted to do a story on PJ and learn about a bunch of stuff. So what'd you find out?
That PJ is my main top takeaway is PJ is authentic in his own way, and everybody, and Iowa fans are this way, especially, he's just so fake. He's doing this and he's all show, and I'm like, no, I learned that pretty vividly that he's not fake. He is authentically himself. Now, is he eccentric? Absolutely. Yep. And he admits it. He's not for everybody. And that's, when you have, and I've talked to recruits both ways, that's just like, I don't know. Like Jack Campbell, for instance.
Right.
PJ went after Jack Campbell, which, imagine that. It would have been
Cedar
great.
Falls, Iowa.
Yep, exactly. And he's just like, I prefer Kirk Ferentz. You know? And okay, that's good. But then I talked to other guys who, were staunchly in his corner, and as you can see, and Anthony Smith and Tarius Taylor aren't coming back to Minnesota if they don't believe in PJ Fleck.
They gave up. They could have made more elsewhere this year, right? Including the NFL. They could have gone to the NFL.
I was surprised Smith didn't go to the NFL. I thought he was an NFL guy, and you look at that. So that was the thing that jumped out to me, was just he is authentic, and they believe in the message. It's an upbeat. It's generally pretty positive, but it's also very disciplined
and challenging.
Yeah, and it's not just because he's the Energizer Bunny of the Big Ten doesn't mean that there's not commitment and toughness and character and everything else, and some of the other things that I really, the more I got to know, and even now, and some other things that I'm considering doing is, just in the wake of what happened in 2020, and that's something that hasn't been let up on the program, that they bring in, a professor every month to talk to the team, to help them have difficult conversations, but open things up within them. So it shows that there's a real bond and character there, and so you can really tell that this is a true program, and I really got that impression from him. And the key is for him, and just like anybody, is can you get enough good players at the right time and that can really take you to that next step? And that's probably been the biggest challenge that I've taken away from him.
Yeah, and like I said, go to The Athletic, and I'm sure it's archived. You do a search with Scott's name and PJ's name, I'm sure it pops up, and people can go back and go down memory lane and read that. But I thought it was well done, and you put a lot of time into that, right? Made a trip or two up to Minnesota. And then last year you referenced the Wisconsin. I wanted to ask about the Wisconsin-Minnesota game. You went out, a couple of former Gopher players were doing a tailgate. Were they deep frying fish or something?
Yes.
Remind me that story, and that's that you can find that as well on the webpage. So take me through what you enjoyed about that cold, snowy day.
Well, we have conversations at The Athletic frequently about tailgating fans. What kind of stories can we connect fans? And I always said, you know what? I'd like to do a story about fans who tailgate in the cold, because it takes a different kind of hardiness. And I'm an upper Midwest guy too here. I think this is the southern border of the upper Midwest.
Yeah.
And I-80, and so I'm like, I see it. I've been a part of it, and I want to do this. And so I said I'd like to do it in Minnesota, and I think the Axe game would be perfect for it. And Justin, Gardsey got me connected connected with a couple of former players, and it just so happened. I mean, the elements were tough that day, but in a good way for my story. I mean, it was like 8 inches of snow, and it was 20 degrees, and the wind was blowing all over the place. But I went into like these, it's like basically like shanties. They're and there was like pheasant and bringing fish back from Alaska and Canada, and they're just like throwing everything together. It was, and it was this bond of these Gophers from the early '80s, and the old era, and guys are guys, no matter what era they're in, and they're the same type of guys that you would expect, and just fun listening to those stories. But being a part of that and writing about their experiences of tailgating when it's that cold and watching them do it. I mean, it wasn't necessarily a well-attended game because of the weather, I think, but it was just the experience of it was timeless.
Yeah, go back and have a read on that as well. And the good news, Scott, for you is a lot of our listeners are already subscribers, I'm sure, because you got Michael Russo and Joe Smith with the hockey coverage, John Krasinski, Johnny Athletic on Wolves. Alec Lewis does such a great job, and Dan Hayes with Vikings and Twins. And so there's probably a lot of our listeners back up north in Minnesota already can just click on and subscribe. If not, and they're listening now and they're not subscribers, if they want to read those articles or anything else, how do they do that? Yeah,
just go to theathletic.com and hit subscribe, or you click on a story of mine or whatever and subscribe on it, and it's you get all this. It's kind of like in today's world, I wish that there was a common element among newspapers, because I think of like covering all these teams now in the Big Ten a little more closely. I'd love to have like a network of where I can read the Star Tribune, or I could read Indianapolis Star or Detroit Free Press and stuff. But with us, you can get it all, because as you mentioned, there's no better hockey writer in the world than Michael Russo, and John Krasinski's right up there with the best too, covering the Wolves, and Dan Hayes, and then of course Alec Lewis has done a really good job stepping in for the Vikings, and so you get all of that, and then you also get college football coverage. Now, we don't have a specific team writer for the Gophers. I kind of fit that role in some ways, and so the more the Gophers win, the more my opportunities go up to write about the Gophers.
No doubt. And you have a couple of local podcasts you do here in Iowa. Chad Leistico, who's with the Des Moines Register, I frequently listen. I don't. I'm trying to become a healthier guy, so I've been walking a lot, and I've found that I hadn't been a podcast listener much, just because time didn't do it. But it's funny when you carve an hour a day out of your time just to try to be healthy, if nothing else. That's what I do. I'll listen to a podcast. So I listen to you guys often, and others, and Guardsy's podcast, The Pair and a Spare, and Ryan Burns, whoever. But if there are fans, just generally Big Ten fans from Minnesota, who might want to find out about the rivals every now and then, you guys do a lot of it. How can they check in on that?
Yeah, we're on the Iowa Everywhere app, or the Iowa Everywhere network, and every Wednesday night, usually Thursdays when it's released, it's Legends and Listeners, so playing on the old divisions, and it's a lot of Iowa centric. Chad is kind of the preeminent Iowa writer now, exclusively for the Des Moines Register, and I bring perspective there, but also I try to broaden it as much as I can and bring these topics to light. And so we go well. We're about an hour long each week on this, and so you can learn about the hated Hawkeyes, but also maybe there'll be a little bit of Big Ten thrown in there as well.
Awesome. Well, you do so much good work. Do you have your week one plan yet? You got a game you decided you're going to cover?
I'm hoping to get to Lambeau. I would like to get to Wisconsin, Notre Dame, because I've never covered a game at Lambeau, and so that it's sort of bucket list type, so that'd be good. If not, or maybe even so, that Saturday, Northern Illinois plays at Iowa, so I may just be here for that. Week 2 though is kind of interesting, because I might do Kansas Missouri on Friday, and then Iowa State on Saturday. So
that Kansas Missouri rivalry was the longest. It's like Minnesota Wisconsin forever, and then when Mizzou left, right, then that left the Big 12, Big 8. That rivalry ended, and is this the second year now they've played? Yeah,
it's the first time they're back in Kansas. So, and last year was, it was everything that I remembered. I lived there for 6 years, right on the border, and
they hate each other.
They hate each other. It's probably most hated rivalry,
Agreed.
I think, that I've been around, because it's funny, it dates back to the Civil War literally, but those feelings continue to persist, that they just don't like him and at all under any circumstances. And so it pained me when they didn't play anymore. And now that they do a little bit in football, they do every year now in basketball, that's great. I compare it a lot to Minnesota, Wisconsin.
Yeah.
I did a rivalry ranking last year, and I had that, I think, 8th, Minnesota, Wisconsin.
It's spirited, but I don't, and there is hatred, but I think it's more spirited. The Missouri, I lived in St. Louis, so I was on the other side of the state for 6 years. But and there's a lot of Missouri fans, obviously, in St. Louis. They just hate Kansas. I mean, that thing was different. To me, that was like it startled me a little bit when you hear. I was at a piano bar one night in St. Louis down on the Landing, and the piano bar, or the guy playing the piano, it was a dueling piano thing. There, and I don't know if it was a nightly bit. I didn't go to the piano bar a lot. The guy comes up and puts $20 in the bowl to play the Missouri fight song, whatever it is. He starts. No, there's Kansas people there. It might have been. No, they wouldn't have played in St. Louis. But anyway, there happened to be Kansas and Missouri fans. In like 5 minutes, the dudes had to make $1,000 because they kept putting 20s to get the other team's fight song. It was genius. If you're dueling pianos, maybe they did it every night, but it was every 15 seconds another $20 bill was going in the fishbowl on the other guy's piano. One guy's playing the Missouri fight song, one guy's playing the Kansas fight song, and they were serious about it. It wasn't like we're having fun. They were getting pissed off. They're putting money in. Don't play that song. Don't play that song. I'm like, I want to be a piano. I got to take piano lessons. I play 2 songs and make $1,000 a night.
Exactly. Yes.
But that's a pretty crazy one.
It's as intense as any. Ohio State, Michigan football is the only one I would compare to.
Right. Yeah. Good point.
But basketball is even more than football.
It is.
I mean, I remember every time they would play it. I was the sports editor of the St. Joe News Press for 6 years, and when they played, like on a Monday night or something, I'm like, oh, here we go.
Yeah.
It didn't matter who won. The next day, my voicemail would be flooded with the other team. And you
favor them? Yeah.
You guys are nothing but Kansas lovers. And I had one lady call me up. She's like, I never learned how to spell the word Kansas, and I never will.
Yeah, that's beautiful. That's what it's about, I guess. That's what it's about. Well, hey, thanks so much. I kept you way longer, but, man, it's so much good, compelling stuff. And, with the way college football and college athletics, the landscape changes, we'll probably have to, redo this in about 6 months and find out what the newest of news is. But always great to see you whenever we get a chance to get together, whether it's a press box or here at a brewery in North Liberty, Iowa. It was fun.
It's been fun. It's great to see you, and I'm sure we'll be seeing you in Chicago for Big Ten Media Days.
We'll be there.
Just a few weeks.
Just a few weeks, it seems like. All right. He is Scott Dochterman, The Athletic. It's episode 225. My thanks to Scott Dochterman from The Athletic for joining me to talk about college football. As always, Scott was bringing the heat, and he was on the money. You can read all of his great stuff at The Athletic. Episode 225 is presented by Sunbelt Business Advisors and True North Mergers and Acquisitions. If you're buying or selling a business, visit sunbeltminnesota.com or tnma.com. Cub's a proud supporter of Gopher Athletics for over 20 years and a proud sponsor of the Go Gopher Podcast with Mike Grimm. Cub, bigger savings on the items you love. Shop happy. Great Clips is our brand new sponsor, and we want to once again thank them for supporting the Go Gopher Podcast. Get in, get out, look great with Great Clips. And OnX Hunt also sponsors the show. Happy fishing from OnX Maps. Again, I'd invite you to listen to past podcasts, and please right now click that subscribe or follow button to the Go Gopher Podcast. It's free to follow, free to subscribe, and free to listen at any time. And please share the link to the podcast with others so they can subscribe and listen as well. And if you enjoyed the podcast, let us know by giving us some positive feedback on your social media channels. We'll talk again next week.
Know what happy is? Veggies. Crunchy, crispy, colorful, seasonal, aromatic, juicy veggies. Produce at its freshest. Cub produce. Best produce, period. Guaranteed to make you happy or will replace it. No questions asked. Because good produce makes veggie lovers happy. Just remember, fresh, happy. Stale, limp, and wilted, not happy. You want to make a veggie lover happy? Shop Cub for produce and shop happy.